It was blessed, for the Deathless dwelt there, and there not faded nor withered. Neither was there any stain upon flower or leaf in that land, nor any corruption or sickness in anything that lived, for the very stones and waters were hallowed. Hey everyone, Yoiston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today our adventures take us to the Undying Lands of the Ainur and Arda, and they are named Valinor. We will explore the history of this great land throughout the ages of the world, the major settlements therein, and which important characters made an impact there. More information may be found in the description and cards, so please check that out. My friends, thank you all for joining me today. Let's begin our tale. The history of Valinor truly begins in 3450 of the Years of the Lamps, even before the light of the two trees graced the earth. Melkor, who even in these early years of the world rebelled against the Valar and destroyed the two lamps that originally lit the world. And so it was that the Valar went west from their old dwelling on the island of Almaran. And eventually they came west to the land of Aman, and there established Valinor. It was a home behind the mountains of Pelori that were raised in defense against Melkor, and in this land the Valar made their homes. This was a place of health, for naught withered, and no corruption or sickness touched the things that lived there, as all was made holy. Of the dwellings of the Valar, I will not say too much individually, but I will list them as they are told by the Tolkien Gateway article that draws from the Silmarillion, linked in the description below. Yavanna had her pastures in the south. Orome had woods to the north of the pastures. Nienna and her brother Mandos lived farthest to the west, in the halls of Nienna and the halls of Mandos respectively. The spirits of fallen elves and men would go to await their fates in the halls of Mandos, one for reincarnation and the other to go beyond. In the south were the gardens of Lorien, where Irmo lived, and an isle in the middle of the lake in Lorien, where was Este, Irmo's wife. North of these gardens dwelt the mansion homes of Aule the Smith, where perhaps the spirits of the dwarves went in their afterlife. And in the northeast, upon the mountain Taniquetil, were the mansions of Manwë and Varda, the elder king and queen of the Valar. After the destruction of the two lamps, a source of new light was needed, and so to the west, upon the mound Izelohar, was planted the two trees of Valinor, Telperion the silver and Laurelin the golden. I should note that time was different in these years, and I made a video on that a while ago if you are interested, but ultimately, the years at this time were much longer than our own present years. Near the trees was the Ring of Doom, where councils were taken by the Valar. Thus, during the early years of the trees, the Valar and Maiar dwelt there in peace, away from Melkor in the east. But with the coming of the Elves to Middle-earth in 1050 of the Years of the Trees, the Valar had to save them from Melkor's designs and offer them a place in the west. And so it was that many of the Elves, the Eldar who came from Middle-earth, built realms and cities of their own in Valinor, coming there to their own elven realm of Eldamar in 1133. The Valinor and Noldor elves built the city of Tirion after the mountain fence of Aman. The Pelori were cut by the Valar to make a rift called the Calakiria, so that the light of the two trees could come through them. Tirion would be built in that pass on the hill of Tuna. Astride the sea, the Teleri who became the Thalmari built Alquilande, a seaport. Others would live on the island of Tol Eressëa and its city Avalone, off of the eastern coast of the mainland, which was originally an island in the middle of the ocean, but was pushed by Ulmo to transport elves to Aman, and then was left off of the coast of Aman. The Valinor, after having first lived in Tirion, would move more inland and establish the city of Valmar near the roots of Mount Taniquetil. After Fëanor left Tirion, Fëanor and his father and other followers would go north of Tirion to establish the fortress of Formenos, where the Silmarils were kept in a treasury for a time. I plan to talk more specifically about each of these places in future videos of their own, but for now, if you want more information, please check out my Elven settlements in the First Age video, as I do speak more about these places as they existed during the First Age. The only connecting land bridge between Middle-earth and Aman was the icy land of Helcaraxe in the far north. Now, before we go back to speaking about the history, major events, and players of Valinor, I must mention the land of Avathar, on the eastern side of the southern part of the Pelori Mountains. This shadowy land would be mostly abandoned, except for the evil creature that took the spidery form of Ungoliant, who lived there for a time. Now, after the elves were welcomed to Valinor by the Valar, there was peace for a time. However, the heart of Fëanor the elf burned hot, and his desire for crafts forced him to achieve the greatest creation of the elven folk in the history of Middle-earth, the Silmarils. Using the light of the two trees, Fëanor made them, and though Melkor had been subdued by the Valar for a time, being held in confinement in the halls of Mandos, a time came when he was released. He would despise the elves and wish for them to suffer. He lusted for the Silmarils, and thus by his actions there was unrest amongst the Noldor elves in particular. Some wanted to rule their own lands, others grew jealous, and some remained level-headed. Melkor spread lies, affecting Fëanor especially. When the Valar became aware of this conspiracy, Melkor fled beyond their sight, and then, with his ally Ungoliant, he returned and destroyed the two trees and darkened Valinor during a festival. He went to Formenos and slew Finwë, the father of Fëanor, and stole the Silmarils, fleeing into Middle-earth. The Noldor, many of whom had given into a great fury, went into exile, vowing to chase Melkor, thus named Morgoth, into the world. So it was that many of the Noldor left Valinor, but some remained under the rule of Fëanor's half-brother Finarfin in Tirion. After this exile in 1495 of the Years of the Trees, the Valar fortified Valinor even more, and at this point the Noldor, those that left, were not allowed to return. The Pelori Mountains were raised higher, the pass of Calakiria was fortified, and enchanted islands that would put any sailor to sleep until the world was changed were placed in the ocean. This was called the Hiding of Valinor. This was also caused to happen after Morgoth sent shadowy spirits against Tilion, the Maya who guided the new moon in the sky, and the Valar wanted to protect Valinor even more. So it was that these defenses held fast, not only against Morgoth, who, to my knowledge, never sent another attack against Valinor in the First Age, but also against the Noldor and the messengers they sent to the west, for none, save one ship, ever reached the lands of Valinor, to my knowledge. Eärendil and Elwing, who were of both kindreds of elves and men, reached the shores of Valinor, which surely brought a great change to the quiet peace of Valinor during the First Age, but the unsettling sight of looking to Middle-earth in the east. Eärendil pleaded on behalf of both kindreds, men and elves, for the aid of the Valar against Morgoth, for the sake of all the free peoples and all of the children of Iluvatar. Their coming heralded a change in the War of the Jewels, the war against Morgoth, as the folk of the Valar raised a mighty host, and went east to defeat Morgoth in the War of Wrath. But since Eärendil and Elwing, who were also of the kindred of men, stepped foot in the Undying Lands, they could not go back to the lands of Middle-earth, so accommodations were made for them, as Eärendil would sail the sky in his ship, and Elwing would learn to skin change into a bird to meet her husband in the sky when he came near her tower, which was built on the northern edges of the world in Valinor. With the end of the war with Morgoth and the First Age, Beleriand was destroyed, and Helcaraxe broken. Thus none, except the elves by ship, who wanted to live out the rest of their days in Valinor, were supposed to be able to come to the Undying Lands. Indeed, some elves returned to Valinor at the end of the Age and were welcomed back, while others would continue to sail west throughout the Second, Third, and even Fourth Ages. But many remained in Middle-earth throughout this time, while many men would dwell in Numenor, between Valinor and Middle-earth. The Dunedain of Numenor were not permitted to sail to Valinor, however, though elves of Tol Eressëa would visit them from time to time. But as the Second Age persisted, the fear of death loomed over the Dunedain, and eventually the corrupted men of Numenor led an assault on Valinor in 3319 of the Second Age, breaking the ban of the Valar. The man Amandil sought to warn and ask for aid from the Valar beforehand, and specifically Manwë, and he sailed there but was never heard from again. Ar-Pharazôn and his host landed on the shores of Valinor, seeking immortality in a place where they would not be able to find it, and with the intervention of Eru Iluvatar that reshaped the world, these men of Numenor were buried beneath the rocks of the Pelori Mountains. Thus that army remained there, in the caves of the Forgotten. As for the land of Valinor itself, it was taken and isolated from the curvature of the world, so that a sailor would just come to the other side of the world instead of Valinor. However, elves that could find it could still take the straight road to peel away from the curvature of the world, and so come to Valinor in the end. And so it was that Valinor remained even more isolated during the Third Ages and beyond. And indeed, the people of the Undying Lands, save the Five Astari, did not join in the great deeds of those later ages, except in subtle ways perhaps. But surely most everything in Valinor would remain as it had been throughout most of the First and Second Ages, except at the end of the Third Age and beginning of the Fourth, with the return of the last elves who would ever come west, and their companions among hobbits and a dwarf. And so it was that Valinor and its lands persisted, and still do, until the world is changed, broken, and remade. Thus we come to the end of our tale on Valinor, the Undying Lands. From this tale of Valinor, we see that the Undying Lands are beautiful beyond measure, but we will never see them. Rather, we should take joy in the beauties of things that aren't made to last forever. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you all enjoyed this region spotlight. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and share this with a friend. What are your thoughts, questions, additions, and corrections on Valinor? Let me know in the comments below. Valinor is quite fascinating, especially because its lore is deep in the Legendarium, and because not much occurs there after the end of the Years of the Trees, but it's still a rather important place. So I'm very glad we got to explore today. Where would you all want to live in Valinor? For me, I think I would want to live near the city of Tirion or Alqualande, although Tol Eressëa would be quite nice as well. Thanks to our Valar tier patrons, Adrian De la Torre, Chris Ortner, Peter Sheppard, Jonathan Putnam, Mark Kralik, Blair Scouten, Tobias Goldner, Merton, John Hume, Reggie93, Jennifer Wood, Sam McBee, Matt Sibbach, Quantum Catalyst, Elizabeth Calvert, Maz Gibbs, Ben Gardner, Kondar, and Kyle Wetzel. Thank you all so much, and thank you to all of our patrons. Please subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the Free Peoples today, and I'll see you all again next week with an updated video on King Dain Ironfoot. My friends, thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one.